Many people think of success in their careers as moving up the management ladder with more and more people working for them. But is this something that's true for technical careers such as working in big tech, or is it possible for you to stay a programmer and keep your fingers in the code? Hi, I'm John Miller, the Deliberate Engineer. I spent the last 30 years working in a bunch of different big tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle, and many others. During that period, I bounced back and forth many times between being an individual contributor or a programmer and being a manager and a manager of managers. What I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit about my experience moving back and forth, and also give you some insights and maybe dispel some of the illusions that people have about being a manager versus being a programmer. I'm making this video because of a question a lot of different people ask me, which is, oh, do I need to be a manager to move up in levels? The answer is no, you don't have to. But it helps to explain some of the basis of it and why you don't have to, and what some of the trade-offs are of staying technical versus being a manager. So stick with me through the rest of this video and we'll spend some time talking about some of the common questions and dispelling any illusions that you have, and also helping you decide whether you want to be a manager or an individual contributor programmer. The most popular question I get is, do you have to be a manager to advance in tech? And as I just said, the answer to that is a resounding no. To illustrate this, let's talk a little bit about the way things work at Microsoft. At Microsoft, if you join as a new hire programmer, typically you'll be working as an SDE1 at level 59 or level 60. Now the levels progress increment by increment until you reach senior SDE at level 63 and level 64. Senior SDE is the first terminal level, in other words, a level that you can get to and not move up any higher and have it not be a bad thing at the company. Traditionally, companies like to see you achieve a certain level of competence at your job. If you don't reach that level, then the general thinking they have is, well, we could probably find somebody who could do that and contribute more to the company. After senior SDE comes a principal SDE band, level 65, 66, and 67. This normally takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years to reach, if you're going to reach it at all. And it includes a lot of different people. A small subset of people move past this level to be partner SDEs, distinguished engineers, and even technical fellows. Now, it's possible for all of these different roles to be individual contributor positions where you don't have anybody reporting to you. It's also possible for them, especially once you become a partner and higher, to actually have a team assigned to you despite having this technical job title. Now, Microsoft moving up the management career ladders is about the same, although it starts a little higher in recognition of the time that you spent as an individual contributor learning the industry enough that you can be a manager. So managers will typically start at the same band as senior SDEs, and many of the managers will be at the principal level as well. Principal level managers will have anywhere from, say, 20 to 200 people reporting to them. And then they can wind up being higher level managers. They don't have the same job titles, but again, it follows the same progression of levels. So you might be a director or a general manager or a vice president. It all depends. The titles change, but there is parity between what you can achieve as an individual contributor and what you can achieve as a manager at Microsoft. The story is quite similar at Amazon as well, or at least it was when I was working there. Level 4 would be the first level of being a developer, SDE1, and then you have level 5. Level 6 would be the equivalent of a senior SDE, and then level 7, principal SDE, was a position equivalent to a senior manager at Amazon. And again, it was possible to go several levels above that, both as an individual contributor and as a manager, where your rewards would be about the same between those two different career ladders because they were the same level and therefore had the same salaries associated with them. And the same was true at Google as well, where I worked for a year or two. Google also has both technical and management positions, and it's actually possible to go much higher with more different divisions as a technical person at Google than you can at the other companies, despite in all cases being able to reach the same heights as a technical individual contributor that you can as a manager. So no, you don't have to be a manager to move up in the career ladder levels to get the good compensation, the bonuses, and the stock. You can do just fine as an individual contributor, assuming that you're a talented individual contributor. Another common question is it easier to be a manager than it is to be a senior technical contributor? To me, the answer is no. It's not any easier. It definitely requires different skills from being a technical individual contributor, but those skills require the same attention to detail. They definitely require much better time management skills because you're having to juggle so many more things as a manager than you do as an individual contributor. Now, as a manager, there's going to be lots of different variables. One will be the size of your team, how many people you have reporting to you, whether they're individual contributors or other managers. Another is that people can be very different in terms of the amount of energy that it takes to manage them. Some of them will require almost no guidance and will just automatically do the right things. Others, you'll spend a lot of time guiding and mentoring and moving forward, each according to their needs. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just part and parcel of doing the job. So it's something that anybody who's going to be a manager should expect. A lot of your time will be dealing with personnel issues and with managing people instead of working directly with technology. You don't automatically get out of this if you're an individual contributor. It's true that you don't have direct people management requirements, but the further up you go as an individual contributor, the larger the things are that you're trying to accomplish. So you won't be able to program the whole thing yourself. You're going to need to work with people in other groups, maybe even other divisions, and get them to agree to your vision. You'll need to put together a spec that describes all the work that's going to be done and get everybody to buy into it, and then make sure that everybody adheres to it. You'll still be mentoring people and teaching them how to do their job better. Some people who you're relying on or who you're working with will require very little effort. Others you'll have to spend a lot of time teaching them the best way to go about their job. And again, this is very much expected. Nothing wrong with it. As a manager managing more than a handful of people, it's quite difficult to be able to make any sort of significant technical contribution. As a manager, your job is to spend time providing air cover for your team and guidance, helping them decide what the right things to do are and delivering on those things. You also need to spend time mentoring them, doing people management things with them, and keeping them from being randomized. In short, I believe it's a full-time job to be managing people. Now, if you try and own a technical deliverable, you need to make sure that it's something that's not critical path for the team's efforts. The reasons for this is simple. As a manager, emergencies and important interrupts happen all the time. It's just part of the job. If you have a critical piece of technical work, then you're forcing yourself to choose between doing the right technical work that has to get done for the team to advance or dealing with whatever the emergency is that came up. And so I think the best thing as a manager is probably not to own anything critical path. At most, you want to own something very simple that can be done optionally for the team. It can still help you scratch that itch for coding, but it doesn't hurt anything if it's not done. So is it possible for a manager to continue coding if that's what they really want to do? I have seen managers with as many as 20 reports spend half of their time doing coding work. They delivered significant, meaningful pieces of code. However, they did this at the cost of the team that they were managing. A couple different things happened as a result. One is that people didn't get the amount of mentoring that they probably could have benefited from. Another was they didn't get protected from people who were coming in, randomizing them, or causing problems. They also didn't get guidance to make sure they were doing the right things from their manager. As a result, I feel like the team overall generally didn't do as well as it would have with a full-time manager. And in my opinion, that means that the technical contribution that the manager made was more than outweighed by the damage to the team's productivity. So, in my opinion, if you're a manager with a large number of reports, say 10 or 20 people on your team, and you're coding with half your time or more, unless you have a really exceptional team, you're probably choosing to prioritize the wrong things. Another question that's commonly asked, once I've become a manager, is there any way for me to go back to being an individual contributor, or is it just impossible? The answer to this is yes, you can absolutely go back to being an individual contributor. In fact, I'm living proof of this, having done it a half dozen times myself. General programming skills take a while to decay, and what I've generally found for myself is even after years of managing, when I go back to programming, I'm generally where I was before after a couple months of effort. As a senior developer, it often takes me anywhere from 6 to 18 months to ramp up and be fully productive in a new job. That means that this 1 or 2 months of getting back up to speed again is subsumed into the startup time at the new job, and it's really nothing more than a minor annoyance, nothing significant. So yes, you can absolutely go back to being an individual contributor after managing. One hidden cost that's worth mentioning, though, is that technology moves forward, and if you're managing and not paying attention to it, you may not keep up with those changes. For example, I worked with an earlier version of C++ and then 2 revisions were released between the last time I used it and the next time I became an IC. Those changes were significant, and it actually took me the better part of a year rather than a couple of months to understand the new way of doing things. So that is one potential cost of switching back and forth between management and being an individual contributor. Likewise, if you're a manager who became an individual contributor for a while, you can absolutely switch back to being a manager. In fact, I would say it's easier than it is to go back to being an IC after a while being away from it. The thing that in the past has taken me the longest to get used to again when I switch context and become a manager again is the time management and the multitasking skills. The demands are much higher as a manager in that regard than they are as an individual contributor. One of the benefits to coming back to being a manager after some time away from it is that you've really had a chance to digest and sort of fully appreciate the good and bad things you did in your previous management role. This lets you start with a clean slate with the new set of people that you're managing and do things in the way that you wished you'd done them the last time, knowing what you know now. As a result, usually as you manage new groups over and over again, you just keep getting better and better at it. And that's definitely a plus. So just to give you the real life example of how many times I switched between being individual contributor and being a manager, I wrote them down so that I could share them. I started out as an individual contributor in test development in 1991. By 1992, I'd been made a manager of a small team, 3 reports, and I kept doing that until I left Microsoft. 1993, I was an individual contributor again, and stayed doing that until 1996, when I became a test manager over a bunch of developers that were developing tests. I think that was 5 or 6 people. Next, I moved on to managing larger test development organizations until I got to the point where I had 3 different managers reporting to me. So I was a manager of managers, and that was an interesting experience. But for me personally, that was enough to tell me, hey, you know what, I probably like managing directly at most in terms of the type of work. By 2001, I was back to being an individual contributor in development again. 2002, the team had grown and now I was a development lead. And I kept doing that for 2 years. And then I moved to research and I was a development manager in research with 9 reports. That fluctuated over the next several years until finally by 2008, I was back to being an individual contributor, still in research, working on technology products for the next couple of years. In 2010, I joined a team where initially I was an individual contributor, and then I became a lead with 5 or 6 reports, and then finally I wound up leading 14 different people before I left and moved back to an individual contributor role again. I did that individual contributor role for 5 years, and then I moved, was a manager for a year, and then became an individual contributor for the next 3.5 years. Then I was a manager of a small team for a few years, and that pretty much brings us up to the present. So you can see I switched between being a manager and an individual contributor many times over the years, and I didn't feel any problems from that. In fact, I made it quite far in both the hierarchies, both the management hierarchy and the programmer hierarchy, so it was pretty satisfying. Summing things up, in big tech you really can have a great career with the same sort of prospects for money, rewards, leveling, recognition as a manager or as an individual contributor programmer. This may not be true in less technical oriented companies, but in the big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and so on, you can absolutely succeed in either one of those trees, depending on what you like doing. So should you be a manager or an individual contributor? Well, as you saw from the earlier example I gave of myself, you don't have to stay with one if that's what you pick, if you decide you want to try the other thing. So you can try both and see which one you like better, or if you're happy in the one you do first, just keep doing that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Do be aware though, as you move up in both management and as an individual contributor, a lot of your work becomes explaining things to people, convincing people of the right technical course to make, coming up with a vision and an overall plan for large projects and products. You own different parts of it, but in both cases you're doing a lot of talking, a lot of communicating. For the management, a lot of people management. For the individual contributor, a lot of sort of providing technical guidance and technical mentoring and educating people until they understand, yes, your way is the right way to go. But they're both great career choices. But enough about the way that I see things. I'm really interested to hear what other people who've done both management and development think. Is your experience similar to mine? or did something else happen to you? Do you have any advice for people who are trying to choose whether to be a manager or an IC, whether to transition between those? Which way is the best way to go? If you get a chance, please leave your stories down in the comments below. I'd love to read them. I think they'd be very useful to the other folks who watch this channel as well. And I'd love to tell you what I think of it if you're interested in my opinion. Anyway, I think that covers pretty much everything for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and keep on pushing forward.